Most people don't fail because their goals are too big. They fail because their systems are too small. If your daily actions don't match your ambitions, then your dreams stay dreams. But the moment you build a system that works even on your worst days, you become unstoppable. Most people underestimate how much their environment quietly shapes their behavior. They assume discipline is everything, that willpower alone is the engine of success. But the truth is simpler and far more powerful. Your surroundings decide your consistency long before your motivation does. When you design your environment intentionally, the right choices become easy and the wrong choices become inconvenient. That's how real systems are built, by shaping the world around you so it supports the person you want to become. Imagine two people with the same goal: to read more. One keeps books hidden somewhere in a drawer, only remembering them when they're exhausted. The other places a book on their pillow every morning, so it's the last thing they see at night. One depends on discipline, the other depends on design. And design wins every time. Your environment should act like an invisible coach. Every item in your room, every app on your phone, every notification you receive is either pushing you forward or pulling you backward. One small change can create momentum without you even realizing it. If your phone is your biggest distraction, leaving it in another room while you work instantly raises your productivity. That didn't happen because you became stronger. It happened because your environment removed the temptation. And this is exactly why building systems starts with reshaping your surroundings. You don't have to overhaul everything overnight. What matters is shifting the space around you so it nudges you toward your goal instead of dragging you away from it. If you want to exercise more, put your workout clothes somewhere visible. If you want to eat healthier, reorganize your kitchen so fresh foods are easier to reach than junk. If you want to focus on your business, set up a dedicated workspace that mentally signals, "Here we work. Here we create." People often fail because they set goals but never change what their everyday world looks like. They want to wake up early, but their room is filled with triggers that keep them awake at night. They want to study more, but their desk is cluttered and uncomfortable. They want to build a habit, but their environment keeps reminding them of their old identity. Success requires alignment between the person you want to be and the space you live in. The powerful part is that these changes don't rely on motivation. They work even when you don't feel like working. When a guitar sits on a stand instead of in a case, you naturally pick it up more often. When a to-do list is placed next to your laptop, you're more likely to start your tasks. When your gym bag is packed the night before, the decision to go becomes easier. Each adjustment removes friction, and the less friction you face, the more consistent you become. Designing your environment is not about making life perfect. It's about removing obstacles that trigger excuses. It's about reducing the number of decisions you need to make so you can use your mental energy for what actually moves you forward. When you make the desired behavior effortless and the undesired behavior inconvenient, success stops feeling like a battle. Your surroundings should remind you of your goals, not distract you from them. Create an environment where your dreams feel natural, not foreign. Everything around you should whisper the same message: you are becoming the person you said you wanted to be. And once your environment supports your ambition, your systems will carry you forward with unstoppable momentum, even on the days you don't feel motivated at all. Big goals fail not because they're impossible, but because they're vague. They sound inspiring in your mind, but collapse under the weight of real life. The only way to turn a huge ambition into something you can actually achieve is to break it into small, daily, non-negotiables, tiny actions that move you forward regardless of your mood, schedule, or circumstances. When you divide your mountain into steps, you remove the fear, overwhelm, and hesitation that come from thinking too big without acting small. A big goal feels exciting for a moment, but excitement fades fast. What remains is your system. And your system begins with defining a handful of actions you must complete every single day. These are not dramatic tasks. They're not meant to impress anyone. They're meant to build consistency, self-trust, and momentum. A daily non-negotiable is something so small that you cannot talk yourself out of it, yet so meaningful that completing it every day compounds into real transformation over time. Think about someone who wants to write a book. Saying I'll write a book this year is overwhelming. It's unclear, heavy, and filled with pressure. But saying I will write 200 words every day is simple, it's achievable, it's measurable. And if they stick to that small action, they end up with more than 70,000 words in a year, more than enough for a full manuscript. The goal remains the same, but the path becomes manageable because the daily action is small and consistent. The same applies to fitness, business, relationships, learning, or any meaningful pursuit. If you want to get fit, your non-negotiables could be a 20-minute walk and one healthy meal a day. If you want to start a business, your non-negotiable might be 1 hour of deep work daily. If you want to learn a new skill, it could be practicing for 15 minutes every morning. What matters is not the size of the action, it's the repetition of it. Your brain and body respond to consistency far more than intensity. Daily non-negotiables also remove decision fatigue. The moment you wake up, you already know what must happen. You're not wrestling with choices, negotiating with yourself, or waiting for motivation. Discipline becomes automatic because your actions are predefined. This predictability is what allows progress to happen even on bad days. You don't need inspiration. You don't need energy. You just need to complete the small, predetermined tasks that keep you moving forward. This approach also protects you from burnout. When people chase big goals, they often sprint at the beginning, exhaust themselves, and quit. Small daily actions create a sustainable rhythm. They allow you to succeed at a pace you can maintain for months or years. And with each day you complete your non-negotiables, you build a powerful psychological advantage, self-trust. You start believing in your ability to follow through. That belief becomes fuel, and that fuel becomes momentum. Breaking big goals into daily actions also gives you clarity. You no longer feel lost or unsure of what to do next. Every day has a purpose. Each step is clear. And even when progress feels slow, you're still moving, still building, still growing. Eventually, you look back and realize that your small, consistent efforts turn into something huge. The beauty of this system is that it makes success feel inevitable. When you commit to these simple, repeatable actions, you create a path that leads to your goal automatically. You no longer rely on mood swings or random bursts of motivation. You rely on structure. You rely on habit. You rely on yourself. Your goals may be big, but your steps don't have to be. Start small, stay consistent, and let your daily non-negotiables quietly build the future you once only imagined. Most people chase their goals with excitement at first, but that excitement never lasts. Motivation is unpredictable. One day it lifts you like a rocket, and the next day it disappears without warning. If your success depends on feeling inspired, then your progress will always be fragile. You'll work hard when you're in the mood and fall apart when life feels heavy. That's why building a system that survives low motivation is the foundation of real achievement. You need routines that hold you up even when your energy, discipline, and enthusiasm disappear, because they will, and that's normal. Winners simply prepare for those moments instead of fearing them. Every meaningful goal has days when you don't want to show up. You're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, bored, or distracted. Life gets in the way. Your mind creates excuses that sound reasonable. And in that moment, most people quit, not because they're weak, but because they rely on feelings instead of systems. But when you design a structure that expects your motivation to fail, you take back control. You no longer depend on willpower. You depend on consistency built into your routine. A system that survives low motivation is one that removes friction. It makes the right action easy and the wrong action hard. It simplifies your choices. It protects you from your own weaker impulses. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't do it because you're motivated. You do it because it's automatic. You've repeated the habit for so long that your brain doesn't question it. That's the kind of system you need for your biggest goals. Something that becomes so natural that skipping it feels strange. There are several ways to build this kind of resilience into your routine. The first is to lower the entry point. Instead of requiring perfect conditions, your system should allow you to keep going even at 10% effort. If you're too tired for a full workout, do 5 minutes of stretching. If you don't feel like writing 1,000 words, write 100. If you can't run your full route, walk half of it. The purpose is not to be perfect. The purpose is to keep the chain alive. When you maintain the habit, even at minimum effort, you stay connected to your goal. That tiny action preserves your identity as someone who shows up, and that identity is far more valuable than one day of high performance. Another key part of a low motivation system is pre-planning. When you decide what to do ahead of time, you remove the mental battle of choosing in the moment. Decision making is exhausting. On low energy days, your brain will naturally seek the easiest path. But if your actions are already defined, the choice becomes simple. You don't think, you execute. That's why routines work so well. They automate positive behavior. A morning routine, a study routine, a workout routine. These structures give your brain a roadmap so it doesn't need to negotiate with itself every day. You can also use environment design to support the system. When the tools you need are already set up, you reduce the effort required to begin. Lay out your clothes the night before. Prepare your workspace so it's clean and inviting. Keep your learning materials accessible. Remove distractions so you don't have to fight them. On days when you're struggling, these small changes make the difference between starting and quitting. Accountability is another powerful element. When someone else is expecting you to show up, you're far more likely to do it even when you don't feel like it. This doesn't mean you need a coach or a partner for everything. Accountability can be as simple as tracking your progress on a calendar, sharing your goals with a friend, or joining a community with similar ambitions. The point is to create enough external pressure that skipping becomes uncomfortable. But the most important part of building a system that survives low motivation is understanding that consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need to crush every day, you just need to avoid 0 days. 0 days break momentum. 0 days break confidence. 0 days teach your brain that quitting is okay. Even the smallest action keeps the engine running. It reminds you that you are still in motion, still committed, still becoming the person you said you wanted to be. When you build a system that carries you through the worst days, the good days become effortless. Progress accelerates, habits deepen, your identity strengthens. You stop seeing discipline as a struggle and start seeing it as a natural part of who you are. And once your system becomes stronger than your moods, your success becomes inevitable because you no longer rise and fall with motivation. You rise with your routine. You rise with your structure. You rise because you built a system that never leaves you behind. Most people judge themselves harshly when chasing goals. They look at their progress emotionally rather than logically. If they miss a day, they feel like failures. If results don't show up fast, they assume they're doing something wrong. But growth doesn't happen in dramatic leaps. It happens in quiet, measurable steps. That's why tracking your progress like a scientist, not a judge, is one of the most powerful systems you can build. A scientist doesn't get emotional about a result. They observe, record, analyze, and adjust. They treat data as information, not as a verdict on their worth. You need that same mindset if you want long-term consistency. When you track your habits, routines, and results, you give yourself something priceless: clarity. Instead of guessing whether you're improving, you can see it. You can see how many days you train, how many sessions you studied, how consistently you work toward your goal. Even when the outward results aren't visible yet, the data tells you the truth. You are moving forward. That clarity alone keeps you motivated when progress feels slow or invisible. Tracking also exposes patterns you wouldn't see otherwise. You may realize that you work best in the morning, or that you lose focus after scrolling on your phone, or that your workouts are stronger when you sleep well. Without tracking, these insights remain hidden. With tracking, they become obvious. And once you know what supports your progress and what sabotages it, you can adjust your system with accuracy instead of guessing blindly. The key is to track the right things. Most people track outcomes, weight, money, followers, scores, but outcomes are lagging indicators. They show up long after the work has been done. A scientist tracks leading indicators, the actions that produce the outcomes. These are the daily habits, the hours invested, the tasks completed. These are what you control. When you measure the process, the results eventually take care of themselves. Tracking also builds self-awareness. It forces you to confront your habits honestly. You can't pretend you're consistent if your calendar shows you haven't practiced in a week. You can't claim that your diet is strict if you have data showing frequent cheating. The numbers don't lie. And while that honesty can sting, it is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Self-deception is the enemy of progress. Tracking removes the disguise. But just as important, tracking highlights your victories, especially the small ones you tend to overlook. Your brain naturally forgets progress and remembers mistakes. This creates a false sense of failure. But when you look back at your logs and see how many days you've shown up, how many hours you've invested, how many tasks you've completed, your confidence grows. You realize you are more disciplined, more consistent, and more capable than you thought. This strengthens your identity and fuels the belief that you can continue. To build this habit, you don't need complex systems. A simple checklist, a habit tracker app, a notebook, or a calendar works perfectly. What matters is that you do it daily. Each check mark becomes a small promise kept. Each data point becomes evidence that you're becoming the person you want to be. Over time, these records become a story of effort, growth, resilience, and discipline. Tracking also allows you to adjust your strategy without drama. When something isn't working, you don't blame yourself. You adjust the system. You tweak the routine. You experiment with a new approach, just like a scientist would. You become curious instead of critical. This mindset protects you from the emotional roller coaster that destroys most people's consistency. When you treat your progress as data instead of judgment, you stay calm, objective, and in control. Ultimately, tracking is a form of respect for your goals, your time, and your future. It keeps you grounded when emotions fluctuate. It shows you the truth when your mind tries to convince you otherwise. And it turns your journey into something measurable, repeatable, and predictable. When you track your progress like a scientist, you remove the guesswork from success. You know where you are, where you're going, and what needs to change. And that level of clarity transforms your goals from distant dreams into inevitable achievements. Most people rely far too heavily on discipline and underestimate the power of automation. They assume they need to be strong every day, make perfect decisions, and resist every distraction. But human willpower is limited. It gets tired, it gets overwhelmed, and it disappears when life gets stressful. The people who achieve their goals consistently aren't superhuman. They've simply removed as many decisions as possible from their daily life. They automate what they can, and they discipline only what they must. This balance creates a system that runs smoothly even when you don't feel your best. Automation is powerful because it eliminates the friction that normally stops you from taking action. When something happens automatically, you don't need motivation. You don't need a massive push of discipline. You don't need to think. The process moves forward on its own. For example, setting reminders for your workouts, scheduling study blocks on your calendar, or using apps to block distracting websites creates an environment where action becomes the default. You don't have to debate with yourself. You follow what's already set for you. Money is another area where automation transforms progress. Automatically transferring a portion of your income into savings or investments means you don't rely on emotional decision making. You don't wait for the right moment. You don't risk spending that money on impulse. You build wealth quietly because the system never stops running. The same applies to nutrition. Meal prepping once a week automates healthy choices for the next 7 days. You're not choosing between junk and clean eating every meal. The choice is already made. Automation creates momentum, but discipline still plays a role. There will always be tasks you cannot. Going to the gym, studying deeply, practicing a skill, writing, thinking, creating. These require human effort. But when your life is filled with fewer decisions, fewer distractions, and fewer battles, you have more mental energy to handle the meaningful work. Discipline becomes sharper and more effective. You're no longer exhausted by tiny decisions all day. You can focus on the actions that truly matter. The key is understanding that discipline is not something you should use constantly. It's something you should protect. You use it strategically, not endlessly. When you automate repetitive tasks, you free your discipline for high-value actions. It's like a battery. If you waste it on choosing breakfast, scrolling, deciding when to work, or constantly resisting temptations, you'll have nothing left for the goals that actually matter. But if your system handles the small things for you, your discipline stays charged and ready for the big tasks. Automation also reduces emotional influence. When everything depends on your mood, your progress becomes inconsistent. But when your schedule, tools, and environment push you forward automatically, your emotions lose their power. You don't wait to feel ready. You act because the system tells you it's time. This removes hesitation and builds consistency, which is far more valuable than intensity. Another benefit is how automation builds identity. When your routines repeatedly guide you to take the right actions, you begin to see yourself as someone who is organized, consistent, and disciplined. You don't just do the actions, you become the person who does them naturally. This identity shift is one of the strongest forces in long-term success. Once you truly believe, I am someone who follows my system, you no longer rely on discipline to start. You rely on who you are. Automation makes your journey smoother, discipline makes your journey stronger. Together, they make your success inevitable. You remove unnecessary decisions, you eliminate friction, you reduce emotional drag, and you create predictability in your life. Instead of fighting your habits every day, you build a world where the right habits carry you. And once your systems run smoothly in the background, you gain the freedom and mental clarity to pour your full energy into the big goals that change your life. Most people focus only on outcomes: lose weight, make money, build a business, learn a skill. But outcomes don't change your life, identity does. When you shift from I want this to I am the kind of person who does this, everything becomes easier. Identity anchors your habits. It pulls you forward even when motivation is low. If you see yourself as a disciplined person, you make disciplined choices. If you see yourself as a creator, you create. The goal is no longer something outside of you, it becomes part of who you are. And when your identity aligns with your ambitions, consistency feels natural instead of forced. Progress becomes a reflection of your self-belief. You stop chasing results and start embodying the type of person who achieves them. But identity alone isn't enough. You need a rhythm of reflection to keep your system alive. Weekly reviews and monthly adjustments ensure you don't drift off course. This process isn't about criticizing yourself, it's about staying aware. A weekly review lets you look at what worked, what didn't, and what needs adjusting. It's a gentle check-in that keeps you honest and focused. A monthly adjustment is your opportunity to refine your routines, upgrade your strategies, and remove habits that slow you down. Small tweaks compound into major transformation. The key is to never quit daily. Even the smallest action keeps your momentum alive. Winners don't avoid mistakes, they avoid stopping. They understand that consistency beats intensity and progress happens one small step at a time. By aligning your identity with your goals and consistently reviewing your path, you create a system that grows with you. You stop relying on luck or motivation and start relying on structure, clarity, and self-awareness. That combination makes your success not just possible, but predictable.